Hey everybody, welcome to the Mother Figures podcast. I'm Caitlin Darkangelo, founder and co-owner of Figure, Midwestern wife, and girl mom. I'm a dual certified pregnancy and postpartum trainer, majored in exercise science from the University of Michigan, earned my master in management degree from Duke University, and have been coaching in the fitness industry for over a decade. This podcast dives into all things pregnancy and postpartum fitness, especially in how to navigate strength and intensity training in these seasons. Whether you're in it yourself, trying to get pregnant, or coaching this population, you're in the right place. I'm excited to share personal experiences, client stories, guest interviews, and evidence-based strategies to give you the guidance, insights, and clarity needed to navigate these seasons with confidence. And with that, let's get rolling. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Mother Figures podcast. Today we are going to be talking all about symphysis pubis dysfunction. This one is near and dear to my heart, unfortunately, as I've talked about a lot on my Instagram page and things like that. So I'm going to tie in my experience with it my first time around in my first pregnancy, how it is different from my experience with SPD this pregnancy, and then just all of the stuff that surrounds it, how to adjust exercise around it, prevalence rates, what it feels like, just so if you've never experienced it, maybe it will help bring light to if you do experience it one day, you already know what it is. Or if you're currently experiencing yourself or you're trying to fight it off for the next time around, maybe I'll be able to help you figure out some tips and tricks to navigate it yourself. So symphysis pubis dysfunction is SPD is a tricky thing to navigate. So in my first pregnancy, I got it when I was 18 weeks pregnant. So in my scenario, first of all, I played softball my whole life. That was like doing what you've always done was softball for me. And so we were playing in a co-ed softball league when I was pregnant. So I was 18 weeks pregnant. We were towards the end of the season. So I played throughout my first trimester. And I was rounding third base to run home. And it was an immediate, there wasn't like a pop per se, but I could just feel this like split, or as if like somebody just like jabbed a knife right in the middle of my pelvis. And I was like, oh my goodness. I ended up rounding third base, but then went back to third base and just like waited till the inning was over. And I was just standing there. I tried walking to the dugout, and this was like a co-ed softball league with our family. So it wasn't like anything crazy. I went to go get my mitt. I tried to go out to the outfield for the next inning, and I could barely make it out to the outfield. I don't know why I pushed through this at the time. I didn't know what SPD was. I didn't know anything about pregnancy, postpartum fitness at the time. This is before I even got into the field. But I remember trying to get out to the outfield, and I was just hoping. I was like, please, nobody hit the ball towards me. I will not be able to move to get it. And so I just kind of sucked it up the rest of that inning, and then the game was over. I remember walking to the car, and I was like, Anthony, I think you have to pull the car up. I can't go. So I just was trying to walk, could barely walk. And then again, at the time I just thought I tweaked something. I don't know what I thought. It was just really painful. So, went home, slept, woke up the next morning, literally could not get out of bed. I spent the next 3 days sitting with an ice pack on the front of my pelvis, thinking and hoping that would make it better. Again, I still had no idea. I thought it was just more of a injury at the time, and maybe it was, who knows. But that was excruciating pain. I could not take a single step, move a single inch without anything, feeling a sharp shooting knife was just stabbing me repeatedly in the pelvis. So that's how that was my first introduction to SPD. And so it can vary in extremity, but my first experience was extreme to the point where I actually visited a chiropractor a few weeks ago, and she thinks it could have been an actual sprain of the joint and the ligament. So that I have a very, very extreme first scenario or first experience with it. And then I also have my experience with it this pregnancy. I'm currently 33 weeks pregnant. And so I'm going to tie those two viewpoints into this podcast because I have very, very mild symptoms of it this time and very, very extreme symptoms of it the first time, and different things tweak it differently for both of these scenarios. So although I would wish this upon nobody, not even my worst enemies, it was actually, it's brought me enlightenment and taught me about this condition from both angles. And so now I am able to help you guys figure it out yourself. So from that angle, I suppose I'm somewhat thankful for dealing with all this. So regardless, symphysis pubis dysfunction is I guess the pubic symphysis is the joint where the two halves of the pelvis meet at the front of your pelvis. So there's like a ligamentous cartilaginous joint piece that is connecting the two halves of the pelvis. That is where symptoms will be felt. The symptoms can be mild, like I have now, to extreme, where like you can't walk, and anywhere in between. Most of the descriptions of pain in this area or symptoms felt is like that sharp shooting pain in a very specific spot, like right in the center there. It could feel like that knife stabbing that I experienced. It can feel like minor pinching. It could be dull and achy in that spot. And sometimes it can radiate to places outside of that area, kind of like low abdomen or groin. So it can sometimes radiate, but typically if you or a client expresses sharp shooting pain down the front of their pelvis, that would indicate that they may have some degree of symphysis pubis dysfunction. So things that are really tricky with symphysis pubis dysfunction, or SPD, I'll just call it that the rest of the podcast, so I don't have to keep saying that over and over again. Single leg movements or anything unilateral tends to create this like shearing effect. So like the joint is where the two halves of the pelvis meet. So anytime you're shifting the pelvis, which is a lot of times doing unilateral work, that can increase the symptoms and the prevalence of pain. So think things like lunges or step ups, single leg, like the floating RDL where like your leg goes up and comes back down. For me, it was even things like bird dogs, donkey kicks, fire hydrants, anytime where one side or one leg is moving and the other leg is staying still. That separation essentially can spark really sharp feelings. And then we get into activities of daily life, which is where I personally felt more incapable or incapable of like just living. It was like a total quality of life issue with me my first time around. Things like walking, going up the stairs, putting on a sock. I couldn't lift one foot off the ground without feeling pain. So that included literally any movement I did. And I'm a personal trainer, so I would still have to go down into the gym and like move barbells side to side, move boxes. Like I remember coming out of one of my training sessions, just like start crying. And I don't cry like ever. I was just in so much pain. And like, I like couldn't do my job. Like it was life debilitating. And so things like, those exercises in the gym and also activities of daily living can get really difficult. So that was my first experience, or exercises or things that sparked it more. This time around, I have a much more mild case of it, and I know how to manage it. And it's like, I forget about it most of the time. I don't feel anything most of the time. But this time around, what I've been noticing is single leg stuff actually feels really solid. What sparks it mainly for me now is one, really low range of motion or low deep squats. So if I squat below 90 with 2 feet, which is the craziest piece because in my first pregnancy, like all I could do was squats with my severe SPD. But now with mild SPD, for whatever reason, that low range of motion on a deep squat is what like will create that feeling of pinching for me. So that's just something to note. And then secondly is any time that I'm doing those single leg movements, like a bird dog, a donkey kick, a fire hydrant, but only when I do those movements without first having warm muscles. So at the beginning of a workout, if those movements are in my warm up per se, as like a mobility piece, which I thought would feel great, that sparks symptoms. But if I do those same exact movements at the end of my workout, I feel no symptoms. And so there's this muscle support piece of the puzzle that I'll talk about in a little bit here, that is super key in managing mild to moderate SPD. We have to get the muscles involved to help stabilize the pelvis, and that can help rid of symptoms in this case. Now, in my first pregnancy with SPD, I can tell you that I don't think any single thing could have helped my symptoms. It was such a severe case that activating my muscles would have done nothing. But in my case, I am able to do certain movements that do spark pain if I am first well activated and warmed up with the surrounding muscle groups, stabilizing the pelvis. So that's second. And then there's also a third category of like what sparks it in terms of activities of daily living. One is sitting for long periods of time. So if I go on a long car ride or have a whole day of like sitting in the car, going to a restaurant, sitting at a event, things that force me to sit down for a long time, that sparks more like stickiness, and it takes me a little bit longer to then walk it out or groove it out and allow my pelvis to get a little bit more fluid. So sitting for long periods of time, that in combination with sitting on hard surfaces, so sitting on like bleachers for a football game, for instance, that sparked a lot of symptoms for me too. So staying stuck in a position can be just as painful as walking or moving that I experienced in the first pregnancy. So there's a varying degree of exercises and activities of daily living that can increase these feelings of pinchiness, sharp shooting pain symptoms that you might feel with SPD. Prevalence rates, it's about 30% prevalent in pregnant moms, generally increasing in the second and third trimester. And the rates overall have been increasing over time because, one, there's greater recognition of moms knowing what that pinching is and being able to express it. And then two, practitioners and providers are then able to take that information and, tie it to SPD instead of just general pelvic girdle pain or just general pregnancy related pain. So that we're getting a little bit more specific on what the pain is. So prevalence rates are rising. So 30% might be very low. And then also from a second and third trimester point of view, the causes of SPD, and these are all theoretical causes. They don't actually know exactly what sparks it. But some of the thoughts behind why SPD might occur. One is biomechanical strains. So as your belly grows forward, it's tilting your pelvis, changing your center of gravity, and pulling your ligaments in a position that they are not accustomed or well adjusted to. So that pressure, strain, change in center of gravity or mass, that all can potentially contribute to more pressure and pain and strain on that pelvic joint. Two is hormonal changes. So you might have heard of the hormone relaxin. This actually spikes in week 12 to 14 of your pregnancy, and it is the hormone that is responsible for relaxing our musculoskeletal system during pregnancy. This is fantastic for labor purposes. It allows our pelvis and our hips to open up and be able to be a little bit more shifty than it normally is for labor and delivery purposes. However, when it comes to pelvic related pains or pregnancy pains, this can be a big culprit because now our body's a little bit looser. And when you add things like changes of center of gravity, things like activities of, strain or quick athletic movements like how I had, when you add those things to the effects of relaxin, that can be a greater risk factor for sparking pelvic pains. I do want to note that although relaxin a lot of times gets the the bad rep for like creating pains, it's not relaxin alone that causes things. In one study, they've found that higher rates of relaxin does not show higher rates of pelvic pain. So we can't tie the fact that like relaxin causes pelvic pain, because higher rates of relaxin didn't show more pain, if that makes sense. But there is still an effect of relaxin. So it's the relaxin plus the activity, the relaxin plus the strain or the weight gain or the change in center of gravity, things that are combining to cause more issue. So there's the hormone piece. Injury is a theoretical cause. So that was in my case, something that like a movement pattern that I did or an impact that can create SPD or cause SPD to happen or occur. General weakening of the joint. And then there's also weight gain. So when you put extra weight on top of that joint, plus the change of center of gravity, that can cause extra strain on that SPD or pubic symphysis joint. And then the last one, which I think is not talked about enough, is muscle weakness. And so when we are talking about pregnancy strength, a lot of times the talk gets into like, oh, we're just like trying to maintain like, us looking good and us keeping our skills in the gym and, reducing weight gain so we bounce back better postpartum. And there's so many great benefits. Obviously, like we want to keep our skills. We want to be feeling like ourselves. We want to be looking good and feeling good and staying as connected to our body as possible. But I think what doesn't get talked about enough in terms of the importance of strength training and prioritizing strength training during pregnancy is reducing pelvic related pains, because the more muscle and strength support we have from our dynamic support, which is our muscle system, the more those muscles can help out our static system, which is our joints and our bones and things like that, when those get lax. So the more strength we have coming into pregnancy, the better our muscle system can stabilize ourselves when those joints get weaker or more relaxed or more loosey-goosey. And so muscle weakness has been shown to be a potential cause of SPD and other related pelvic pains, because when you have weak muscles, you now have weak joints and you don't have muscle support to hold it together. Which makes strength training not just like a good to have thing during pregnancy, but like, in my opinion, and I wish this was pushed more, like a must have during pregnancy. So those are some theoretical causes. In terms of resolution or like how to get SPD to go away, for most people, for most moms, it regresses after having your baby, after 1 to 6 months postpartum. One study saw that about 25% of moms who had SPD during pregnancy have it resolved by the 4-month postpartum mark, which is actually when I kind of experienced that resolution going away for the first time around. That's when I was able to finally sleep with a pillow between my legs or without a pillow between my legs. So that was nice to not have to rely on that anymore. But there is something to note that you can also develop SPD in a traumatic delivery. So the joints are loose, depending on delivery experiences or whatever. Some moms do get SPD during labor. So obviously that would prolong the amount of time postpartum that takes for SPD for them to go away. I just wanted to caveat or throw that in there. So that's from like a more of a medical mindset of when things can resolve itself. Most moms with SPD are told like, oh, you'll just have to wait for the baby to come. Like not much you can do about it. And that's really frustrating. That's what I was told. In my case, I think that was the appropriate thing that I should have been told, because mine being so severe and so injury based, that was just a little bit different. However, I have been able to help a lot of moms with SPD pain during their pregnancy and actually reduce it and sometimes eliminate it completely. And so I want to kind of highlight on more of the prevention / management of it to hopefully eliminate symptoms of that. So first, from a prevention side, again, nothing is preventable 100%, but we can, again, like I always say, stack the deck in your favor by doing specific intentional exercise. So for me, a prevention point for this pregnancy, in between pregnancies,
I went absolutely ham on single leg strengthening exercises. So that included like heavy lunges, heavy step ups, lateral step ups, Cossacks, single leg glute bridges, clamshell related stuff, Copenhagen planks, anything that was single leg strength, mobility, or stability based. I just like prioritize the heck out of that. Because going back to that muscle strength piece, the more muscle reserve I have coming into pregnancy, knowing that I am predisposed to having SPD in this next pregnancy because of how severe I had it the first time, I knew I was going to have to do something to make sure I was willing to do anything it took to not experience it how I did the first time around. So the amount of single leg strengthening I had for strengthening not only just glutes, but quads, hamstrings, adductors, abductors, any muscle group that attaches to the pelvis has a role in stabilizing the pelvis. And therefore, I wanted to make those muscles super strong, but not just super strong, but super functional. So training in full ranges of motion, getting really low in my Cossack holds, for instance, in addition to going really heavy in my squat. So I wanted the muscles to be super mobile, super functional, be able to work in its full range of motion, and be super strong so that when relaxin did hit me again the second pregnancy, I would have a good base of support to support my pelvis when it needed it. In addition to the lower body strength, I also went ham on core stability, which tied into pelvic floor and deep core function. So when you engage your deep core transverse abdominis muscle literally physically attaches to your pelvis, like the top, the hip bones, like you can kind of feel those parts of your hips. Your deep core muscles literally connect all around onto the top of your pelvis. And then your pelvic floor is the muscle group that is stabilizing the bottom of your pelvis. So the deeper connection I could maintain and build with my pelvic floor and deep core, the better chances I was going to have of being able to, again, stabilize the pelvis from now a deep level. That could help that pubic symphysis joint at the front of my pelvis, and hoping to release any pains there. In addition to the strengthening and functionality and mobility piece, I also focused a lot on releasing tension. So there's a difference between strength and tension. I wanted to release tension in the pelvic floor and mainly in my like inner thighs or adductors, because any tension can also create strain or extra tension on the pubic symphysis joint. So yes, I wanted to mobilize, I wanted to stabilize, I wanted to strengthen, but I also wanted to release tension or unnecessary strain on surrounding muscle groups like the pelvic floor, my inner thighs, in hopes that it wouldn't create extra tension or tightness in that joint. So we want the joint to be able to be stabilized, but not extra tense. So there's this like really big balancing game of strength, stability, mobility, and then relaxing and being able to work in a full functional range of motion with all of the surrounding muscle groups in the area of the pubic symphysis joint. So that is not only prevention things, that's things that I've had been focusing on in my postpartum journey. And then early on in my pregnancy program, I also highlight a ton of single leg strength before relaxin hits in, so I can make sure that you guys are set up with that same foundation, even if you didn't prioritize it prior to pregnancy, which is why doing a pregnancy specific program is so key. It is so different than just normalizing or modifying your general workouts for pregnancy. There's a huge piece of like intentionality around stuff like this, like releasing tension, stability in the like deep core, strength in the single leg movement, stuff like that. So that's all more prevention style movements and things that we can be doing to set us up. Those are also the same things we could be doing if we do have SPD. However, there is a big asterisk on it depends on the severity of the SPD that you have. So for my first experience, if you would have told me to try to do a lunge, I could not even attempt a lunge. If you try to get me to do a step up or anything, like I could not do a step up. So In that case, managing SPD gets a little trickier because there's less you can do from a functionality point of view, or like stabilizing and strengthening those muscles, because we are cutting out a lot of the movement patterns that could help it. However, we still want to have a unilateral strength focus to hopefully balance out that pelvis or get pieces moving at the same time. So we at least rule out compensation patterns. So things like unilateral squat, so putting one dumbbell on one side of your shoulder and squatting down. So at least you're loading one side, but you're still having the stability of both your feet, so we're not getting that shearing effect of a lunge per se. There's also like single leg RDLs, where that B stance, so that toe is just touching the ground behind you and you're hinging forward on that front straight leg. So at least we're able to get the hamstrings unilaterally loaded, even though we still have the support of both legs. Things like that, or whatever movements that you are able to do that focus on single leg strength, that can help, again, gain that muscle strength so we don't have muscle weakness around the area, to hopefully help stabilize. There's also the deep core piece. So the same thing as in the prevention, working on deep core and pelvic floor strength and function, full range of motion. So those big inhales to release tension, exhale to stabilize the pelvis. So the combination of releasing tension in those areas and functionally training them to strengthen the muscles there too can hopefully, one, release tension from the pubic symphysis joint to allow it to not be in this like protective, like clenching mode all the time, which can lead to symptoms and pinching itself, but also strengthening the pelvic floor, strengthening the deep core so we have more stability or support around the pelvis, can be things that you are able to do if you do have SPD. And then kind of just doing, this is going to be so vague, but doing what you can. So I remember when I did have SPD trying to management, I got so frustrated one day and I just sat down. I'm like, okay, what are all the exercises I can do? Because I felt so limited, because everything I did, even transitioning from like one station to the other, felt limiting. So I had to do the majority of my workouts like seated or sitting down, just to avoid any movement at all. So I just wrote down a list of exercises I could do. And that came out to things like box squats and dual deadlift or dual dumbbell deadlifts, goblet squats, glute bridges, pretty basic things, shoulder presses, anything upper body. I kind of focused on for a while there as I was getting through that initial few weeks of being like, okay, this is my new reality. what can I do? So just focusing on the things that you can do. I know that's not like the answer that most people want to hear, but in addition to doing whatever single leg strength you can, getting that pelvic floor and deep core involved, and then just like focusing on what you can do, can all be really good ways to manage SPD during pregnancy. There's also something to be said about using external support. So if you can get into any kind of lunge or something, but you use a PVC pipe to stabilize yourself, or holding on to the rig and just like slowly controlling yourself down, slowly coming up, finding ways like that to decrease or modify lunges and things, or like just doing whatever you can to reduce the symptom but still train the stuff that it's going to help, can be huge. And then it's also really hard to explain on a podcast, but there's also a lot of more rehab based movements, like if you push against your knees and then you try to like push outwards, and then vice versa, have your hands inside your knees and then have your knees push inwards and like resist with your hands. There's a lot of different like techniques there. Some chiropractors or pelvic floor therapists can go through those specific rehab movements with you. I personally tried pelvic floor therapy in my first pregnancy. It made zero difference. In this pregnancy, it did make a difference, and I was able to learn techniques and rehab style movements that did help. So I would also recommend seeing a pelvic floor therapist and seeing, depending on your situation, if they can help with managing that through more rehab based. Maybe there's some internal tension that they can manually release with like an internal exam. But pelvic floor therapy is specialized and can help with any pelvic pains, because it's all such a related system. So even if you have joint pain of symphysis pubis dysfunction, pelvic floor therapists are still, most of them, I think that's like the primary thing, they are trained in pelvic pain and managing and releasing symptoms there. So that is something that you can also do from a management point of view if you do experience it. So that is that. SPD is, again, more prevalent. It's becoming more prevalent. It's really shitty. I don't wish it upon anybody. You can have it with different levels of severity. But hopefully this podcast helped bring light to just some of the stuff around it, maybe some of the management techniques, prevention pieces, so we can overall just have a smoother pregnancy with less pains, which is the goal of all the things when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum fitness. So with that, I will see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Mother Figures podcast. If these episodes help or resonate with you in any way, it would be so helpful to the show if you could leave a review so we can get this into more moms' hands. And if you're looking for even more guidance and direction when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum fitness, I got you covered. My Mother Figures app subscription includes my Figure Pregnancy and Figure Postpartum workout programs, in addition to our general fitness programs. You'll get the day-by-day workouts you need to help you feel strong, pain-free, and labor-ready during pregnancy, and also the recovery, strength, and progressions you'll need to get back to the activities you love, full of strength and without symptoms after baby arrives. If you're local to the Brighton, Michigan area, I also host daily women's functional fitness classes, a 6-week postpartum return to fitness course, and pregnancy and postpartum consultation sessions. For those who are providers, coaches, or practitioners in the space, I hold a live Mother Figures certification course that equips you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to train and work with this population. For information on all of these services and programs, make sure to check out fitisgettingreal.com/moms or head to the show notes for the direct link. I'm so thankful that you tuned in today's episode, and I will catch you next time.